Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I was bored one Friday night, scrolling through Hinge, not really expecting much. I'd been on the app for a while, gone on a few dates that were fine. Nothing special. Then I saw her. Sarah. Her profile pic was this candid shot of her laughing, eyes crinkled at the corners, standing in front of a bookstore. She looked real. Like someone you could actually have a conversation with, you know? Not just another selfie queen. Her bio was short and sweet. Lover of books, rainy days, and good coffee. I swiped right without even thinking. We matched almost instantly. Which, okay, already felt a little too good to be true. But I was riding the wave of optimism, so I messaged her. We started chatting, and it was easy. Like we'd known each other forever. We talked about books, obviously. Movies, our families, everything. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and I felt the same way about her. After a week of constant texting, we decided to meet up. She suggested this little cafe downtown, a place I'd never been to but heard good things about. I was nervous, obviously. I always get nervous before first dates. But I was also excited. I really felt like this could be something special. The cafe was cozy, all warm lighting and comfy chairs. I got there a few minutes early and grabbed a table. I kept checking my phone, rereading our texts, trying to calm my nerves. Then she walked in. She looked even better in person. She was wearing this cute dress, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She smiled when she saw me, and my heart did this weird little flip-flop thing. We hugged, and then we sat down. The date started out great. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed so naturally. She was funny, intelligent, and surprisingly down to earth. I was completely smitten. But then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. She kept asking me really specific questions about my apartment. Like, what floor I lived on, how many windows I had, what kind of security system I used. I brushed it off at first, thinking she was just being curious. But the questions kept coming, and they got more and more detailed. Then, she started talking about my routine. She seemed to know a lot about my schedule, like when I went to work, when I went to the gym, even when I walked my dog. I hadn't told her any of this stuff. I started to feel uneasy. I tried to change the subject, but she kept steering the conversation back to my personal life. It was like she was trying to build a profile of me, piece by piece. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, and when I looked in the mirror, I noticed how pale I was. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm myself down. I told myself I was overreacting, that she was just being friendly, but the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. When I got back to the table, she was on her phone, typing furiously. She quickly put it away when she saw me. "Sorry," she said. "Just had to send a quick text." I forced a smile. No problem. The rest of the date was a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, scrutinized. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. So I stayed, forcing myself to make conversation. Finally, the date ended. We walked outside, and I offered to walk her to her car. She declined, saying she had parked nearby. We hugged goodbye, and I practically ran back to my apartment. I locked the door behind me, double-checking all the windows. I felt like I could finally breathe again. I tried to convince myself that I was just being paranoid, that I had let my imagination run wild. But then, I got a text from her. It was a picture. It was a picture of me, sitting at my desk in my apartment. The picture had been taken through my window. I froze. My blood ran cold. I didn't know what to do. I stared at the picture, trying to make sense of it. How could she have taken that picture? How did she know where I lived? I ran to the window and looked outside. I didn't see anyone, but I knew she was out there, watching me. I called the police, but they said there was nothing they could do without more evidence. They took my statement, but they didn't seem to take me seriously. I spent the rest of the night barricading myself in my apartment. I pushed furniture in front of the doors and windows. I turned on all the lights. I couldn't sleep. Every creak and groan of the building sent a jolt of fear through me. The next day, I stayed home from work. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't open the door. I just sat there waiting. I knew she would come back. And she did. That evening, I heard a noise outside my door. A soft scratching sound, like someone was trying to pick the lock. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under my bed and crept towards the door. My heart was pounding in my chest. I could hear my own breath echoing in my ears. The scratching stopped. Then I heard a voice. "It's okay," the voice said. "It's just me." It was Sarah. I didn't open the door. "Go away," I said, my voice trembling. "I just want to talk," she said. "Please." I didn't answer. "I know you're scared," she said, "but I'm not going to hurt you." I didn't believe her. "Please," she begged. "Just open the door." I hesitated. A part of me wanted to believe her. A part of me wanted to know why she was doing this. But I couldn't. I couldn't risk it. "Go away," I said again, more firmly this time. There was a long silence. Then I heard her footsteps fading away. I stayed up all night, watching the door. She didn't come back. The next day, I moved out of my apartment. I packed everything I owned into boxes and drove to my brother's house, a few states away. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I changed my phone number. I deleted my social media accounts. I wanted to disappear. I thought I was safe. I thought I had escaped. But I was wrong. A few weeks later, I was at my brother's house, sitting in the living room, watching TV. The doorbell rang. My brother answered it. I heard him talking to someone. Then I heard him say my name. I froze. I knew who it was. I got up and walked to the door. And there she was. Sarah. She smiled at me. "Hello," she said. "I've been looking for you." Behind her, I saw something that made my blood run even colder than before my brother. Except it wasn't my brother. It was Sarah, wearing a disturbingly realistic mask of his face. The mask was too perfect. How could someone make something so lifelike? And that's when it hit me. The Sarah I met on Hinge, the Sarah who was so obsessed with me, wasn't Sarah at all. It was someone else, someone wearing a mask. And not just a physical mask, a psychological one too. The real Sarah was standing behind her, tied up and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. The person in the mask smiled, a chillingly familiar grin. "You didn't think you could get rid of me that easily, did you?" she said, her voice a distorted, unsettling imitation of my brother's. "We're just getting started." Next. Okay, so, I gotta tell you about this seriously messed up thing that happened to me last year. It all started, pretty normal, you know. Just me, swiping through Hinge on a boring Tuesday night, trying to find someone to grab coffee with. Little did I know, I was about to stumble into some real-life horror movie stuff. Seriously. I saw his profile first. He had, 3 pictures. The first one was him hiking, looking all outdoorsy and rugged, with this huge grin on his face. The second was a blurry shot of him playing guitar at some bar, all backlit and mysterious. And the third one was kinda weird. It was just a close-up of his eyes. Really intense, blue eyes. But whatever, I was bored, and he seemed cute enough. So I hit the like button. He matched with me almost instantly. His first message was just a simple hey. But something about it felt off. I can't really explain it. The way he wrote it felt too eager, to something. But I ignored it. I mean, I was looking for a date, right? So, I replied with something equally lame, and we started chatting. He was super into me, immediately. He kept saying things like, "I knew we were meant to meet, and I feel like I've known you my whole life." It was flattering at first, but then it started to feel suffocating. He wanted to know everything about me. What I did for work, where I lived, my favorite food, my childhood dreams. I tried to keep things light, but he just kept digging deeper. We talked for a few days, and he kept pushing to meet up. I was hesitant, honestly. Something about him gave me the creeps, but I didn't want to be rude. Plus, my friends were all telling me to just go for it. "You never know," they said. "He could be the one." Ugh. So I caved. We agreed to meet for drinks at this bar downtown. It was a Friday night, and I was already feeling anxious. I spent like an hour trying to decide what to wear, and another hour trying to convince myself that I wasn't making a mistake. When I got to the bar, he was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. He was even more attractive in person than he was in his pictures. He had this intense energy about him, like he was buzzing with excitement. He stood up when I walked over and gave me this really intense hug, like he didn't want to let go. The date started off okay, I guess. We talked about the usual stuff, our jobs, our hobbies, our families. But he kept steering the conversation back to me. He'd hang on every word I said, like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. And he kept staring at me with those piercing blue eyes. It was unnerving. As the night went on, he started to get weirder. He started asking me about my dreams again. But this time, he wasn't just curious. He was interrogating me. He wanted to know every detail, every fear, every secret. He kept saying things like, "I need to know everything about you," and "I want to understand you completely." I started to feel really uncomfortable. I tried to change the subject, but he wouldn't let me. He just kept pushing and pushing, until I felt like I was trapped in some kind of psychological game. Then, he started talking about this weird theory he had. He said that everyone has a soulmate, someone who's perfectly compatible with them on every level. And he was convinced that I was his soulmate. He said that he'd been searching for me his whole life, and that he knew the moment he saw my profile on Hinge that we were destined to be together. I tried to laugh it off, but he was dead serious. He grabbed my hand and looked me straight in the eyes. "I'm not kidding," he said. "We belong together. I know it in my heart." That's when I knew I had to get out of there. I made some excuse about having an early morning and said I had to leave. He seemed disappointed, but he didn't try to stop me. He walked me to my car and gave me another one of those bone-crushing hugs. "I'll call you," he said, with a creepy smile. I drove home as fast as I could, and as soon as I got inside, I blocked his number and deleted him from Hinge. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Little things, at first. Like, I'd find a flower on my doorstep, even though I never told him where I lived. Or I'd see someone who looked like him in the distance, but when I got closer, it would be someone else. Then, things started to escalate. I started getting strange phone calls in the middle of the night, just silence on the other end. I started finding notes on my car with cryptic messages like, "I'm watching you," and "We're meant to be." I was terrified. I knew it was him. I knew he was stalking me. I went to the police, but they said there wasn't anything they could do unless he actually threatened me or harmed me. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus on anything. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to appear. One night, I was home alone, watching TV, when I heard a noise outside. It sounded like someone was trying to open my front door. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept towards the door. I peeked through the window, and there he was, standing on my porch with a bouquet of roses in his hand. He was smiling. I didn't know what to do. I was paralyzed with fear. He started knocking on the door, louder and louder. "I know you're in there," he shouted. "Just open the door. I just want to talk." I couldn't breathe. I was convinced he was going to break down the door and kill me. Then, suddenly, the doorbell rang. I jumped, startled. Who could be ringing my doorbell at this hour? I cautiously walked over to the door and looked through the peephole. It was him. But how? He was still standing on my porch. I could see him through the window. I looked back at the peephole. It was him, but different. His eyes were blank, lifeless. His skin was pale and waxy. He looked like a doll. Then, I realized what was happening. I wasn't looking through the peephole. I was looking at a mirror. The real him was already inside the house. I screamed, and then everything went black. I woke up in the hospital a few days later. I had a concussion and a few bruises, but I was alive. The police told me they found him in my attic. He'd been living there for weeks, watching me. He had cameras set up in every room. He was completely insane. They arrested him, of course. He's in a mental institution now. But the thing that really freaks me out, the thing that I still can't wrap my head around, is this. When they searched his apartment, they found a Hinge profile that wasn't his. It was mine. He had created a fake profile using my pictures and my information, and he was using it to lure other women into his trap. Turns out, I wasn't his soulmate. I was just his next victim. And that blurry photo of him playing guitar? It wasn't him. He stole it from some random guy's Instagram account. The hiking photo. Stock image. He wasn't even the guy I thought he was. He was just nothing. A blank slate, ready to project his obsession onto whoever he could. And that's way scarier than any monster under the bed. Listen to this absolute mind trip that happened to me last summer. I still get the creeps thinking about it. I swear, Hinge should come with a warning label or something. I was bored, right? Summer in my small town is basically just waiting for college to start again. All my friends were either working internships in the city or backpacking through Europe, leaving me stuck with endless sunshine and nothing to do but binge-watch true crime documentaries. That's when I re-downloaded Hinge, figuring, hey, maybe I'd find someone cool to hang out with. The profiles were the usual mix of gym selfies, hiking pics, and guys holding fish they definitely didn't catch themselves. But then I saw him. Liam. His profile was different. No cheesy grins or posed photos. Just a few snapshots of him in what looked like the middle of nowhere. A blurry image of him hiking in a dense forest. Another of him sitting by a crackling campfire. And one where he was silhouetted against a stunning sunset over a mountain range. He looked adventurous, a little mysterious, and honestly, really cute. His bio was even more intriguing. It just said, looking for someone to share the quiet with. That was it. No mention of his job, his hobbies, or what he was looking for. Just that. It was weird, but also alluring. Like, what did he mean by the quiet? Against my better judgment, because, let's be real, I usually swipe left on guys who look like they live off-grid. I swiped right, and he matched with me almost instantly. We started chatting, and things got even weirder. He wasn't super talkative, but when he did respond, his messages were always thoughtful and intense. He asked me about my fears, my dreams, what I thought happened after death. Heavy stuff, especially for a dating app. He told me he lived in a cabin in the woods, about an hour outside of town. He said he worked remotely as a software developer, but he mostly spent his time hiking, reading, and just being in nature. He made it sound so peaceful, so idyllic. After a week of chatting, he asked me if I wanted to come visit him at his cabin. My brain screamed an oh. Red flag, but my curiosity got the better of me. I told myself it was just a day trip. I'd go in the morning, leave in the afternoon. What could possibly go wrong? I told my best friend, Sarah, about my plans, and she was not thrilled. She gave me the whole stranger danger speech and made me promise to text her every hour on the hour. I rolled my eyes, but secretly, I was a little nervous too. The drive to his cabin was creepy. The paved road turned into a dirt track that wound deeper and deeper into the woods. The trees grew taller and thicker, blocking out the sunlight. My phone lost service about halfway there, which didn't exactly calm my nerves. Finally, I saw it, a small, wooden cabin nestled in a clearing. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the only sound was the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a bird. It looked exactly like something out of a horror movie. Liam was waiting for me on the porch. He was even more handsome in person, with piercing blue eyes and a kind smile. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, and he looked genuinely happy to see me. He showed me around the cabin, which was surprisingly cozy. It was small and rustic, but clean and well-maintained. There was a fireplace, a small kitchen, a bookshelf overflowing with books, and a loft bedroom. We spent the morning talking, drinking tea, and just getting to know each other. He was intelligent and articulate, but there was still something off about him. He had this intense way of looking at me, like he was trying to see inside my soul. After lunch, he suggested we go for a hike in the woods. I hesitated, but I didn't want to seem rude. Plus, I figured it would be a good way to get some fresh air and distract myself from the weird vibe I was getting. The hike started off normal enough. We walked along a well-worn trail, talking about nature and stuff. But then, Liam started to lead me off the trail, deeper into the woods. I asked him where we were going, and he just smiled and said, "I want to show you something special." We walked for what felt like forever, until we came to a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a giant oak tree, its branches reaching up to the sky like gnarled fingers, and hanging from one of the branches was a swing. It wasn't a normal swing, though. It was made of thick rope, and the seat was a rough-hewn piece of wood. It looked old, like it had been there for years. Liam walked over to the swing and started pushing it gently back and forth. "This is my favorite spot," he said. "I come here to think, to meditate, to just be." He turned to me and held out his hand. "Want to try it?" I hesitated. Something about the swing gave me the creeps. It felt wrong. But again, I didn't want to seem rude. So I took his hand and sat down on the swing. As he pushed me higher and higher, I started to feel a little dizzy. The trees were spinning around me, and the ground was rushing by below. I started to feel a sense of unease, like something bad was about to happen. Suddenly, the swing snapped. I screamed as I fell to the ground, landing hard on my arm. Pain shot through my body, and I gasped for breath. Liam rushed over to me, his face filled with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked. I tried to sit up, but my arm was throbbing. "I think I broke it," I said. He helped me to my feet and led me back to the cabin. He cleaned my wound and wrapped my arm in a makeshift splint. He was so attentive and caring that I started to feel a little better. But as he was tending to me, I noticed something strange. On his wrist, just below his sleeve, was a small tattoo. It was the same symbol that was carved into the seat of the swing. I stared at the tattoo, my blood running cold. I had seen that symbol before. It was the symbol of a local cult that had been rumored to operate in the woods decades ago. A cult that supposedly practiced human sacrifices. I tried to stay calm, but my heart was pounding in my chest. I knew I had to get out of there. I made up an excuse about needing to get home, and Liam reluctantly agreed to drive me back to town. The whole way, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, that he knew what I was thinking. When we got back to my car, I practically jumped out of his truck. I thanked him for the day and told him I'd text him later. As I drove away, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw him standing there, watching me. He didn't wave, he didn't smile. He just stood there, his eyes burning into me. I didn't hear from Liam again after that day. I tried to forget about the whole thing, but it haunted me for months. Then, a few weeks ago, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw a familiar face. It was Liam, or at least, someone who looked exactly like him. But his name wasn't Liam. It was David, and he was engaged. I clicked on his profile and started scrolling through his photos. And that's when I saw it. A picture of him and his fiancée standing in front of the cabin in the woods. The same cabin where I had spent that terrifying day. But that wasn't the worst part. In the background of the photo, hanging from the branch of an oak tree, was a swing. And carved into the seat of the swing was the same symbol that was on Liam's wrist. Underneath the photo, someone had commented, "Congratulations, another one joins the family." I felt sick. I realized that Liam hadn't been looking for someone to share the quiet with. He had been looking for someone to sacrifice. The twist, David's fiancée. It was Sarah, my best friend, who told me about stranger danger. She had been playing me all along, and she's now part of the cult. I'm still trying to figure out how to save her. Well, buckle up, because mine is a legit nightmare fuel situation. I'm still trying to process it, and honestly, just writing it down is making my skin crawl. It started so innocently. Typical Hinge, swipe right situation. But trust me, it went from zero to full-blown horror movie faster than you can say ghosted. I was bored, okay? It was a rainy October, the kind where the sky is permanently gray, and all you want to do is binge-watch cheesy horror flicks under a blanket. My roommate, Sarah, kept bugging me to get back on Hinge, saying I needed to put myself out there. Ugh, fine. I caved. I scrolled through the usual suspects. Guys holding fish. Guys posing with their cars. Guys who looked suspiciously like they were still living in their mom's basement. Then I saw him. Liam. His profile was different. He wasn't conventionally attractive, but there was something about his eyes. They were this intense, almost unsettling shade of blue, and they seemed to look right through you. His pictures were all artsy and moody, black and white shots of him walking in the woods, a close-up of his hands holding a vintage camera, that kind of thing. He described himself as an old soul who appreciated deep conversations and the beauty of the macabre. Okay, a little pretentious, maybe, but it was a refreshing change from the gym selfies. We matched, and the messages started. At first, it was normal stuff. We talked about our favorite movies, books, music. He was surprisingly well-read and had a dark, quirky sense of humor that I kinda liked. He was a photographer, which explained the artsy profile pics. He lived in this old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, said he was restoring it. It sounded kinda cool, honestly. But then things started getting weird. He'd ask me these really personal questions, things that felt way too intimate for someone I just met online. Like, what's your biggest fear? Or, what's the one thing you regret most in your life? I tried to brush it off as him just being deep, but it started to feel like an interrogation. He also had this obsession with my dreams. He'd ask me about them every morning, wanting every single detail, no matter how bizarre or mundane. He said dreams were windows to the soul, and that he could learn a lot about a person from them. I started feeling uncomfortable sharing them, but he was so persistent, so interested, that I didn't want to seem rude. One night, I had this really strange dream. I was in a dark, empty house, wandering through the rooms. I kept hearing this faint whispering, but I couldn't make out what it was saying. Then, I saw a figure standing in the corner of one of the rooms. It was tall and shadowy, and I couldn't see its face, but it felt malevolent. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. I reluctantly told Liam about the dream the next morning. He was practically vibrating with excitement. He asked me a million questions about the house, the whispering, the figure. He said it was a significant dream and that it meant I was sensitive to the other side. The other side? What the heck was he talking about? That's when he suggested we meet. He wanted to take me to his house, the Victorian one. He said he had something he wanted to show me, something that would change my perspective on everything. I hesitated. I had a really bad feeling about this, but he was so persuasive, so insistent, that I eventually caved. I told myself I was being paranoid, that he was just a quirky artist with a weird fascination with dreams. I told Sarah where I was going, just in case. The drive to his house was creepy. It was way out in the boonies, miles from anything. The road was narrow and winding, and the trees were so thick they blocked out most of the sunlight. When I finally arrived, the house was even more imposing than I'd imagined. It was a huge, Gothic-looking mansion with boarded-up windows and overgrown vines crawling up the walls. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Liam greeted me at the door with a strange, almost manic smile. He was wearing a long, black coat, and his eyes seemed even more intense than usual. He led me inside, and the air immediately felt colder, heavier. The house was dark and dusty, filled with antique furniture and creepy old paintings. He took me on a tour, showing me the different rooms. He told me stories about the house, about the people who had lived there before, about the tragedies that had occurred within its walls. He said the house was haunted, and that he could feel the presence of the spirits. I was starting to get really freaked out. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. Plus, I was kind of curious about what he wanted to show me. Finally, he led me to the basement. It was even darker and colder down there. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. He flicked on a single light bulb, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. In the center of the room was a large, wooden table. On the table was a collection of strange objects, old books, tarnished silverware, dried flowers, and a small wooden box. He told me that these were artifacts from the house's past, objects that were imbued with the energy of the spirits. He said he used them to communicate with the dead. He then opened the wooden box. Inside was a small, intricately carved doll. It looked old, really old, and its eyes were unsettlingly lifelike. He picked up the doll and held it out to me. He said it was a vessel for the spirits, that it could allow me to connect with the other side. I recoiled. I didn't want anything to do with it. "No, thanks," I said, my voice trembling. "I think I should go." He looked disappointed, but he didn't try to stop me. He walked me back to the door, his eyes following me the whole way. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, but I didn't see anything. I didn't hear from Liam again. I blocked him on Hinge, blocked his number, and tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. But I couldn't. The dreams started getting worse. They were more vivid, more terrifying. The shadowy figure was always there, watching me, waiting. One night, I had a dream that I was back in Liam's house. I was in the basement, standing in front of the table. The doll was there, staring at me. Suddenly, the doll's eyes started to glow. It started to speak, its voice a raspy whisper. "You can't escape us," it said. "We're always with you." I woke up screaming. I was terrified. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let this guy mess with my head anymore. I did some research on Liam. I found out that he had a history of mental illness. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and had spent time in a psychiatric hospital. I also found out that the Victorian house he lived in had a dark past. It had been the site of several murders and suicides. The house was rumored to be haunted, and people said that strange things happened there. But the creepiest thing I found out was that Liam had been obsessed with a woman who had lived in the house a century ago. Her name was Eliza, and she had died under mysterious circumstances. Liam believed that Eliza's spirit was still trapped in the house, and he was trying to communicate with her. I realized that Liam wasn't just a quirky artist. He was a disturbed, possibly dangerous man who was living in a haunted house and trying to contact the dead. I knew I had to report him to the police. But then, something even stranger happened. I got a notification on my phone. It was a message from Hinge. It was from Liam, but the profile picture wasn't Liam. It was a picture of Eliza, the woman who had lived in the house a century ago. The message said, "Thank you for visiting. I enjoyed our time together." My blood ran cold. How could this be possible? Liam was blocked. And how could he use Eliza's picture? I clicked on the profile. It said the account was created yesterday. Then I noticed something else. The location. It wasn't Liam's house. It was my house. I slowly turned around. The room was dark, but I could see a figure standing in the corner. It was tall and shadowy, and I couldn't see its face. But I knew who it was. It wasn't Liam. It was me. In the reflection of the window, I saw myself, but not myself. A version of myself with those same intense, unsettling blue eyes. A version of myself with that same manic smile. A version of myself wearing a long, black coat. A version of myself holding a small, wooden doll. And then everything went black. I woke up in my bed. The sun was shining, and Sarah was making breakfast in the kitchen. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said. "You okay? You were screaming in your sleep last night." I told her everything that had happened. About Liam, about the house, about the doll. She listened patiently, but I could tell she didn't believe me. "It was just a dream," she said. "You've been watching too many horror movies." I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't, because I knew that it wasn't just a dream. It was real, and I was still in that house. Okay, so, I never thought I'd be that guy, you know? The one with the dating app horror story. I always figured those were made up, or at least, wildly exaggerated. But trust me, this actually happened, and it's still messing with my head. It started innocently enough. I was bored, swiping through Hinge one night, trying to find someone who didn't just post pictures of themselves doing yoga on a mountaintop. Seriously, how many flexible people are there in this city? Then I saw her profile. Sarah. Her pictures were different. Not the usual filtered to oblivion stuff. Just regular snapshots. One of her laughing with a dog at the park, another of her reading a book in a coffee shop, and one, weirdly, of her standing in front of this really old, creepy-looking house. She had this kind of quirky, almost shy smile that I found really attractive. Her bio was short and sweet. Lover of books, dogs, and exploring abandoned places. Okay, the abandoned places thing was a little strange, but hey, I was intrigued. So, I sent her a message about the book she was reading in her picture. She replied almost immediately, and we started chatting. It was easy, effortless. We had a lot in common. Same taste in music, the same weird sense of humor, even the same obsession with true crime documentaries. After a few days of texting, I asked her if she wanted to grab coffee. She said yes, and we made plans to meet up the following Saturday. I was actually excited, which is rare for me when it comes to dating. Saturday rolled around, and I met her at the coffee shop. She was even prettier in person. That shy smile was even more captivating. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. I felt like I'd known her forever. We laughed, we debated. We even bonded over our shared love of bad puns. By the end of the date, I was completely smitten. We walked back to my place, and I was about to ask her in, but she stopped me. She said she had an amazing time, but had to get home. I didn't want to push it, so I just gave her a hug and said I'd text her. The next few weeks were a blur. We went on date after date. Hiking, museums, concerts. We did it all. I was genuinely happy. I started introducing her to my friends, and they loved her. Everything felt right. Until it didn't. It started subtly. She'd get these weird mood swings, going from bubbly and affectionate to distant and withdrawn in a matter of seconds. I chalked it up to stress or something. Then came the questions. She started asking me about my past, not in a casual, getting-to-know-you way, but in a probing, almost accusatory way. She'd ask about my exes, my family, my childhood. It felt like she was digging for something, but I couldn't figure out what. And then there was the house. The creepy house from her profile picture. She kept bringing it up. She'd say things like, "Have you ever felt drawn to a place?" Or, "Some houses have stories to tell." It was getting weirder and weirder. One night, after a few too many drinks, she asked me to go there with her. Just to see it, she said. I hesitated. I had a bad feeling about it, but I didn't want to disappoint her. So I agreed. The following weekend, we drove out to the house. It was even creepier in person. It was old Victorian style, with peeling paint, boarded-up windows, and an overgrown yard. It looked like something out of a horror movie. As we walked towards it, I felt a chill run down my spine. "Are you sure about this?" I asked. She just smiled that shy smile and said, "Trust me." We walked around the house, peering through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. The inside was dark and dusty, but I could make out furniture covered in white sheets. It looked like someone had just left in a hurry. Sarah seemed to be in a trance. Her eyes glazed over as she surveyed the property. Suddenly, she grabbed my hand and pulled me towards the back of the house. There was a small, wooden shed hidden behind some overgrown bushes. The door was slightly ajar. "Let's go inside," she said. I hesitated again. "I really don't think this is a good idea," I said. But she was already pulling me towards the shed. I reluctantly followed her inside. The shed was small and cramped, filled with old tools and gardening supplies. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and dirt. In the corner, there was a small, wooden box. Sarah rushed over to it and opened it. Inside, there was a stack of old letters. She picked one up and started reading it aloud. It was a love letter, written by a man to a woman named Sarah. The letter was dated 1923. As she read, her voice started to change. It became deeper, more resonant. It sounded like an old woman's voice. I was terrified. I tried to pull her away, but she wouldn't budge. She kept reading, her voice getting more and more distorted. The letter was filled with details about their love, their dreams, their hopes for the future. But then it took a dark turn. The man wrote about how he suspected Sarah was having an affair. He wrote about his jealousy, his rage. He wrote about how he couldn't live without her. The last line of the letter sent a bolt of ice through my veins. "If I can't have you, no one can." Sarah finished reading, her eyes now completely black. She turned to me, a malevolent smile spreading across her face. "He loved me so much," she croaked, her voice a horrifying mix of young and old. "He never wanted to let me go." I stumbled backwards, knocking over a pile of tools. I knew, in that moment, that I was in serious danger. I had to get out of there. I turned and ran, bursting out of the shed and sprinting towards the car. I could hear Sarah behind me, her footsteps surprisingly fast. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I finally managed to unlock the door and jump inside. I started the engine and sped away, leaving Sarah standing in the driveway, her eyes burning with rage. I didn't stop driving until I reached the city. I went straight to my apartment and locked myself inside. I spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner, terrified to move. The next day, I went to the police. I told them everything that had happened. They listened politely, but I could tell they didn't believe me. They said they'd check out the house, but they doubted they'd find anything. I never heard from them again, and I never heard from Sarah. I deleted my Hinge account and vowed never to use dating apps again. I tried to forget about the whole thing, to convince myself that it was just a bad dream. But then, a few weeks later, I was cleaning out my closet when I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a small wooden box, the same box from the shed. I opened it, my hands trembling. Inside, there was a stack of old letters, and on top, there was a picture of me, standing in front of the creepy house. But in the picture, I wasn't alone. Standing next to me was Sarah, and she was holding my hand. I never took that picture. I don't even own a Polaroid camera. I live alone. I checked my security camera footage. Nothing. I don't know how that picture got there. The picture was dated, of course. The date was today. I looked closer at the picture, examining Sarah. In the background, the creepy house seemed to grow taller, the windows darker. I noticed something I hadn't before. I look at Sarah's head, and I see a familiar face. It's me. My blood turned to ice. I am Sarah. I am a ghost, reliving a tragic love, doomed to repeat this cycle, and I am now trapped in the memories of my past. My name isn't even Sarah, but the truth of the matter is, I can't even remember my real name. Oh God, now you will be trapped with me forever. Okay, so you know how everyone says online dating is a minefield? I thought I was being smart about it, you know? Reading profiles carefully, reverse image searching, the whole 9 yards. But honestly, nothing could have prepared me for what happened with Ethan. I still get this cold knot in my stomach just thinking about it. It all started, like most things these days, with a swipe. His profile was pretty standard. A couple of pictures of him hiking, always a good sign, right? One with his dog, bonus points. And a bio that said he was a software engineer who loved trying new restaurants. Seemed harmless enough. We matched, and the conversation flowed easily. He was funny, engaging, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything from our favorite movies to our most embarrassing childhood moments. After a week or so of texting, he suggested we meet up for coffee. I checked all the boxes of things to do to be safe, even telling my roommate where I was going. The coffee date went great. Ethan was even more charming in person. He was tall, with kind eyes and a disarming smile. We talked for hours, and I felt this weird, giddy feeling like maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. We made plans to go out again the following weekend. We had a picnic at a botanical garden, and then we went to a concert. We laughed, we talked, we even held hands. It felt perfect. That's probably when the first red flag popped up, although I was too caught up in the perfect feeling to notice it at the time. As we were walking back to my car after the concert, Ethan suddenly stopped and stared intensely at a darkened house across the street. "Beautiful architecture," he murmured, almost to himself. I didn't think much of it then, but looking back, there was something unsettling about the way he said it, like he knew something I didn't. Things progressed quickly after that. We started spending almost every weekend together. He introduced me to his friends, who seemed nice enough, but there was something a little off about them. They were overly polite, almost robotic, and they always seemed to be watching us, waiting for something. Then came the weekend he invited me to his family's cabin in the woods. It was a long drive, and by the time we arrived, it was already dark. The cabin was secluded, nestled deep within the trees. It was rustic and charming, with a crackling fireplace and cozy furniture. Ethan said his parents weren't able to make it, but his older brother, Caleb, would be joining us. Caleb was different. He was taller than Ethan, with a gaunt face and piercing blue eyes. He barely spoke, and when he did, his voice was low and gravelly. He gave me the creeps, honestly. He had that stare that makes you feel like he is looking inside your soul. That night, after dinner, Ethan suggested we play a game of cards. Caleb sat across from us, his eyes fixed on me the entire time. As the night wore on, I started to feel increasingly uncomfortable. There was a strange tension in the air, like something was about to happen. Around midnight, Ethan excused himself to get more firewood. As soon as he was gone, Caleb leaned across the table and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" I asked. He didn't answer, but his eyes darted towards a framed photo on the mantelpiece. It was a picture of Ethan and Caleb as children. I glanced at the photo, then back at Caleb. His expression was unreadable. A few minutes later, Ethan returned with the firewood. The tension seemed to dissipate, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't sleep that night. I kept tossing and turning, my mind racing. The next morning, I woke up early to go for a walk. As I was wandering through the woods, I stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center of the clearing, there was a dilapidated old shed. Curiosity got the better of me, and I cautiously approached it. The door was slightly ajar, so I peered inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. The shed was filled with old photos, newspaper clippings, and strange artifacts. Most of the photos were of young women, all of whom looked eerily similar to me. The newspaper clippings detailed a series of unsolved disappearances in the area, all dating back several years. As I sifted through the photos, I found one that made me gasp. It was a picture of Ethan, but he looked much younger. He was standing next to a woman who looked exactly like the women in the other photos. The caption underneath the photo read, "Ethan and his friend, Sarah, summer 2010. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Ethan wasn't who he said he was. The perfect relationship, the overly polite friends, Caleb's warning, it all made sense. I was in danger. I turned to run, but it was too late. Ethan was standing behind me, a sinister smile on his face. "I see you found my little collection," he said, his voice chillingly calm. I tried to scream, but he grabbed my arm and dragged me back towards the cabin. I struggled and fought, but he was too strong. As he dragged me through the woods, I caught a glimpse of Caleb, standing on the porch of the cabin, watching us with a detached expression. Ethan forced me inside the cabin and tied me to a chair. He then proceeded to tell me the whole story. The woman in the photo, Sarah, was his first love. She had disappeared without a trace, and Ethan had never gotten over it. He had spent years searching for her, but he had never found her. Eventually, he came to the conclusion that she had been taken, murdered. He had created a dating profile and started dating women who resembled Sarah, hoping to find some closure. But none of them were the same. None of them filled the void that Sarah had left behind. Until me. He said I was the closest he had ever come to finding Sarah again. He said he couldn't let me go. He was going to keep me there, in the cabin, forever. As he was talking, I noticed something strange about his eyes. They were glazed over, like he was in a trance. He was muttering to himself, repeating Sarah's name over and over again. That's when I realized he wasn't just obsessed with Sarah. He was completely delusional. He actually believed that I was Sarah. And that's when it happened. Caleb walked into the cabin, a look of grim determination on his face. He looked at me, then at Ethan, then back at me. "It's enough, Ethan," he said, his voice firm. "This has to stop." Ethan didn't respond. He just kept muttering Sarah's name. Caleb sighed and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small handgun and pointed it at Ethan. "I'm sorry, brother," he said, "but I can't let you hurt anyone else." And then he pulled the trigger. Ethan collapsed to the floor dead. Caleb turned to me, his eyes filled with remorse. "I should have stopped him a long time ago," he said. "I'm so sorry." He untied me and helped me escape the cabin. We drove to the nearest town, where he turned himself in to the police. The whole thing was a nightmare. I still have trouble sleeping at night. I'm seeing a therapist, and I'm slowly starting to heal. But the one thing I can't shake is the look on Caleb's face when he shot his brother. It wasn't the face of a murderer. It was the face of someone who had finally done what he had to do, no matter the cost. It turns out, Ethan had been telling the truth about one thing. Caleb wasn't just his brother. He was his identical twin. And Caleb, posing as Ethan, had been watching me, making sure his actually insane brother didn't act on his impulses, and making sure that I was safe. Turns out the profile wasn't Ethan's, it was Caleb's. Ethan was barely computer literate. I'm not usually one for sharing super personal stuff online, especially not the really messed up stuff. But like this Hinge story, it's been eating at me for months, and I kinda just need to get it out there, you know? I swear, it's the reason I basically ghosted dating apps altogether. It started out so normal, so freaking ordinary. That's what gets me. I'd been swiping for what felt like forever, the usual blur of gym selfies and travel pics. Then I saw his profile. Liam. He had this really intense look in his eyes in all his photos, but not in a creepy way, more like observant. His bio was simple, just a few lines about hiking and old movies. Something about him just clicked. We matched, obviously, and started chatting. He wasn't your typical Hinge guy, firing off cheesy pickup lines. He actually asked me about my photography, which is a big deal for me. I'm not, like, a professional or anything, but it's my passion. We talked about everything from Ansel Adams to film grain, and honestly, it was refreshing. We decided to meet up at this little coffee shop downtown. I was kinda nervous, but when I saw him walk in, I felt this weird sense of calm. He looked exactly like his pictures, maybe even a little more handsome in person. He was tall, with dark hair and those piercing eyes. We talked for hours that night, about our families, our dreams, everything. It felt easy. Things progressed pretty quickly after that. We went on hikes, saw movies, he actually liked old black and white films, and even cooked dinner at my apartment. He was always respectful, always listened, and always seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. He was like the perfect guy. But then, things started to get weird. Subtle at first, like a background hum you can't quite place. I started noticing things he said, little details that didn't quite add up. He'd mention places he'd been that didn't align with stories he'd told me earlier. Or he'd have these moments where he'd just stare off into space, his eyes glazed over, like he wasn't even there. One time, we were walking through this park, and I pointed out this really cool old oak tree. He just stopped. His face went white, and he grabbed my arm so tight it actually hurt. He didn't say anything, just stared at the tree like it was going to attack him. Then, just as suddenly, he snapped out of it, apologized profusely, and said he was just feeling a little lightheaded. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But the weirdness kept piling up. He started calling me by this nickname, Lillian, which wasn't even close to my actual name, which is, let's say it's Amy. I corrected him a few times, but he kept doing it, like he didn't even realize he was saying the wrong name. Then came the dreams. I started having these really vivid, disturbing dreams where I was in this old house, surrounded by shadows. There was always this feeling of dread, like something terrible was about to happen. And in every dream, Liam was there, but he wasn't Liam. He was different, cold, menacing. I started doing some digging. I know, it sounds crazy, but I was genuinely starting to freak out. I went on his social media, trying to find any clues, anything that could explain what was going on. And that's when I found it, buried deep in his Instagram, a picture of him standing in front of that exact same oak tree from the park. The caption read, Lillian's favorite spot, forever missed. I clicked on the location tag. It led me to a small, rural cemetery about an hour outside the city. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to go there. I know, it was a terrible idea, but I had to know. So, the next day, I drove out to the cemetery. It was small and overgrown, with crumbling headstones and a thick, heavy silence. I found the section Liam's Instagram had tagged. It was old and almost abandoned. And then I saw it, a headstone with the name Lillian etched into the stone. Below it, the dates, 1928 to 1947. She died young, really young. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the headstone, trying to make sense of it all. Was Liam obsessed with this woman? Was he a time traveler? Was I losing my mind? I decided to leave. I didn't want to be around there any longer. As I walked back to my car, I noticed something glinting in the sunlight near Lillian's grave. I knelt down and picked it up. It was a small, silver locket. I opened it up, and inside, there was a tiny, faded photograph. It was a picture of Lillian, and it was me. I swear, it was my face, my eyes, my smile. But it couldn't be. It was impossible. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do. who to talk to. I felt like I was trapped in some kind of twisted nightmare. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to find some logical explanation. Then, around 3 a.m., I heard a knock at my door. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Liam. He was standing there, his face pale, his eyes wide and desperate. He whispered, "Lillian, I know you're in there. Please let me in." I didn't move. I just stood there, frozen in fear. He kept knocking, kept calling my name, or rather, Lillian's name. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he stopped. I heard him sigh, then walk away. I waited until I was sure he was gone before I finally opened the door. The hallway was empty. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to get away. I had to leave. I packed a bag, threw in a few essentials, and got in my car. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. As I pulled out of my parking lot, I saw something in my rearview mirror that made my blood run cold. Liam was standing on the sidewalk, watching me. He didn't say anything, didn't move. He just stood there, his eyes fixed on me, a faint smile playing on his lips. I drove away as fast as I could, not stopping until I was miles away from the city. I haven't been back since. I changed my number, deleted all my social media accounts, and moved to a different state. I still have nightmares about that house, about that cemetery, about Liam. But the weirdest part? The part that still keeps me up at night? A few weeks after I moved, I went to get a new driver's license. When the clerk asked for my name, I told her, Amy. She looked at me, confused. "Ma'am," she said, "your name is Lillian." I checked my new license, and there it was, staring back at me in bold, black letters, Lillian. And the picture? It wasn't me. It was the woman from the locket, the woman from the grave. I looked in the mirror for hours that day, and slowly, the reflection in the mirror began to change. The features softened, the lines blurred. I began to look like her. I don't know what happened. I don't know who Liam is, or what he wanted. All I know is that I'm not Amy anymore. I'm Lillian, and I'm terrified. I watch horror movies all the time, and I'm always the one saying, "That's so fake," or "That would never happen." But let me tell you, what happened to me last fall, it was way scarier than anything I've ever seen on a screen. It's the kind of thing that makes you question reality, you know? I still get chills thinking about it. Honestly, I'm kinda nervous even writing this down. It all started with Hinge. I was bored, swiping through profiles, looking for someone cool to hang out with. I came across this girl, Sarah. She was, like, totally my type. Long, dark hair, those eyes that seemed to look right through you, and a smile that could melt glaciers. Her profile was pretty basic. A couple of pictures of her hiking, one with her dog, and a short bio saying she loved books and indie music. Normal stuff. We matched, and I was stoked. We started chatting, and things seemed really promising. She was witty, intelligent, and we had a lot in common. We talked about everything from our favorite authors to our most embarrassing childhood moments. It was easy, you know. The kind of connection you don't find very often. After a week of texting, we decided to meet up. She suggested this coffee shop downtown, a place I'd never been to before. It was kind of tucked away, off the main street, with dim lighting and mismatched furniture. It had this weird, almost gothic vibe to it, which I thought was kinda cool. I got there a few minutes early and grabbed a table in the corner. I was a little nervous, but mostly excited. I wanted this date to go well. A few minutes later, Sarah walked in, and she looked exactly like her pictures. Maybe even better. We ordered our coffees and started talking. The conversation flowed effortlessly. We laughed, we debated, we shared stories. Time flew by. I was totally falling for this girl. As we were talking, I noticed something weird. Every now and then, Sarah would just zone out. Her eyes would glaze over, and she'd stare off into space for a few seconds. Then she'd snap back to reality like nothing happened. I didn't want to be rude, so I didn't say anything at first. But it kept happening. And each time, it lasted a little longer. It was starting to freak me out. "Hey, Sarah," I said, trying to sound casual. "You okay? You seem a little out of it." She blinked and smiled. "Oh yeah, I'm fine. Just a little tired, I guess. Long week at work. I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just stressed. We kept talking, but the weirdness continued. Then, things took a turn for the really bizarre. We were discussing our favorite movies when I noticed her hand twitching. Just a little, but enough to catch my attention. Then it started shaking. Violently. I reached across the table and took her hand. "Sarah, what's wrong? Are you sure you're okay?" Her eyes widened, and she looked at me with this expression of pure terror. "Get away from me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You need to leave. Now." I was stunned. "What? Why? What's going on?" She didn't answer. Her body started to convulse. She was shaking so hard the table was rattling. People were starting to stare. I was completely freaked out. I had no idea what to do. I wanted to help her, but she was pushing me away. "Please," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "You have to go. It's not safe." I didn't hesitate. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and ran out of the coffee shop. I didn't look back. I spent the next few days trying to figure out what the heck had happened. I texted Sarah, but she didn't reply. I checked her Hinge profile, but it was gone. She'd unmatched me. I was seriously worried about her. I couldn't shake the image of her face, the terror in her eyes. I felt like something terrible had happened. I decided to go back to the coffee shop and see if anyone knew anything. The barista remembered us and said that Sarah had been acting strange all week. He said she'd been talking to herself, muttering about some kind of entity. That's when I started to get really scared. What if Sarah was possessed? What if she was in danger? I did some digging online and found a few articles about demonic possession and mental illness. I know it sounds crazy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something supernatural was going on. I spent weeks searching for Sarah, posting flyers, contacting her friends, the few I could find through mutuals online. No one had seen her. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. Finally, I gave up. I figured whatever had happened to her was beyond my control. I tried to move on with my life, but I couldn't forget about her. A few months later, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw a post from a friend. It was a news article about a missing person case in a neighboring town. I clicked on the article, and my blood ran cold. The missing person was named Sarah, and the picture, it was her. But something was different. Her eyes. They weren't the same eyes I remembered. They were cold, empty, devoid of any emotion. I read the article, and it described Sarah as a quiet, introverted girl who had been struggling with mental health issues for years. She had recently stopped taking her medication and had been acting increasingly erratic. Then came the twist. The article mentioned that Sarah had been living in a group home for people with mental illness. The group home was located right next to the coffee shop where we had our date. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The zoning out, the twitching, the terror in her eyes. She wasn't possessed. She was having a psychotic episode. And the reason she told me to leave? She wasn't trying to protect me from some demonic entity. She was trying to protect me from herself. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I had been so quick to jump to supernatural conclusions. I had been so focused on my own fear that I hadn't considered the possibility that Sarah was just sick. I immediately contacted the police and told them everything I knew. They were able to locate Sarah a few days later. She was safe and sound, and she was back in the group home receiving treatment. I never saw Sarah again, but I often think about her. I wonder if she remembers me, if she knows that I tried to help her. And I learned a valuable lesson that day. Sometimes, the scariest things in life aren't ghosts or demons. They're the things that are real, the things that are happening right in front of us. Mental illness, loneliness, despair. Those are the things that truly haunt us. I will never forget her. So yeah, that's my Hinge horror story. Not the kind with jump scares or blood, but the kind that sticks with you and makes you think. A lot. It messed me up for a while, but I'm all right now. Kinda. Okay, so, this is gonna sound totally crazy, right? But I swear on everything, this happened. I usually wouldn't even tell anyone, because who would believe me? But I guess writing it out helps. I don't know. Just promise you won't think I'm making this up. It all started with Hinge, like most ridiculously bad decisions these days. I was bored, okay? Freshly single, scrolling endlessly, swiping left on guys holding fish, right on the ones with dogs. Predictable. I know, judge me. Then I saw him. Liam. His profile was different. Not the usual carefully curated highlight reel. One picture was blurry, like he'd been caught off guard laughing. Another was of him hiking, all muddy boots and windblown hair. And his bio was just as simple, looking for someone to explore with. No witty one-liners, no list of accomplishments, just that. It felt real. I swiped right. We matched instantly. He messaged me almost immediately, something about how he recognized my favorite local coffee shop in one of my pics. We chatted for a few days, and honestly, it was easy. He was funny, smart, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, not just trying to hook up. He asked about my job, my family, my weird obsession with true crime podcasts. I actually started looking forward to his messages. So, naturally, I agreed to meet him. He suggested a picnic in the Redwood National Park. I know, sounds like something out of a cheesy rom-com, right? But the park is seriously beautiful, and I figured, what the heck? It was a sunny Saturday morning when I drove up there. The air was crisp and smelled like pine needles, and the sunlight filtering through the towering trees made everything look magical. He was already there when I arrived, standing near a clearing with a picnic blanket laid out. He was even better looking in person. Tall, with messy brown hair and these unbelievably blue eyes. He smiled when he saw me, and I swear, I felt my stomach do a little flip. The picnic was perfect. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He told me about his travels, his passion for photography, his slightly eccentric family. I told him about my dreams of becoming a writer, my embarrassing karaoke moments, my fear of pigeons. We laughed, we shared stories, we even held hands for a second while reaching for the same sandwich. Cliché, I know, but it felt right. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, he suggested we go for a walk. We wandered off the main trail, deeper into the woods. The air grew cooler, and the sounds of the park faded away, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a bird. He led me to a hidden grove, bathed in soft, golden light. It was breathtaking. He told me it was his favorite spot in the whole park, a place he came to clear his head and find inspiration. He seemed at peace there. That's when things started to feel a little off. He started talking about the trees, not in a nature-loving, appreciation kind of way. He talked about them like they were listening, like they were ancient and powerful, and knew secrets we couldn't even imagine. He said they held memories, not just of the park, but of everything that had ever happened there, every life that had been lived and lost. It was weird, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was just a little quirky, I thought. Artsy. Deep. Then he started talking about me. He said he felt a connection to me, a sense of familiarity that went beyond just meeting a few hours ago. He said he felt like he knew me, like we had met before, in another life maybe. I started to feel uncomfortable. I laughed it off, told him he was being a bit much, but inside, my heart was starting to pound. He reached out and took my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. His eyes were intense, almost hypnotic. "Don't you feel it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't you feel the connection? The pull?" I pulled my hand away. "Liam, I think I should go," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice was trembling. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me, his eyes unblinking. The light in the grove seemed to dim, and the wind picked up, rustling the leaves around us in a frantic whisper. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my arm. "Please," he said, his voice suddenly pleading. "Just stay a little longer. I need to show you something." I hesitated. I don't know why. Maybe it was the way he looked, so vulnerable and desperate. Maybe it was just plain stupidity. But I stayed. He led me deeper into the grove, to a massive redwood tree, its trunk wider than a car. He touched the bark reverently, then turned to me. "This tree," he said, "is the heart of the grove. It holds the most memories, the most power." He told me that he had been coming to this grove for years, that he had learned to communicate with the trees, to tap into their ancient wisdom. He said they had shown him things he couldn't explain, things that would change my life forever. I was officially freaked out. I knew I had to get out of there. "Liam, I really have to go," I said, trying to pull away again. This time, he didn't let me. He tightened his grip on my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. His eyes were wild, his face flushed. "No," he said, his voice hard and cold. "You can't leave. You're part of this now. The trees have chosen you." He started to drag me towards the tree. I struggled, but he was too strong. I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the wind. He pushed me against the tree, my back pressed against the rough bark. He leaned in close, his breath hot on my face. "You'll understand," he whispered. "Soon you'll understand." Then, he did something that I still can't quite comprehend. He started chanting. It wasn't in any language I recognized, just a series of guttural sounds and strange rhythms. As he chanted, the air around us seemed to vibrate. The leaves rustled more violently, and the ground beneath my feet began to tremble. I closed my eyes, terrified. I thought I was going to die. Then, everything went silent. I opened my eyes. Liam was gone. I was alone in the grove, the only sound the gentle rustling of the leaves. The air was still, the light soft and golden. It was like nothing had ever happened. I ran. I ran as fast as I could. Back to the trail, back to the parking lot, back to my car. I didn't stop running until I was miles away, safe in my own apartment. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing his face, hearing his voice, feeling his grip on my arm. I kept replaying the events of the day in my head, trying to make sense of it all. The next day, I called the park rangers. I told them about Liam, about the grove, about everything that had happened. They listened patiently, but I could tell they didn't believe me. They said they would investigate, but they didn't seem too concerned. I never heard from them again. I deleted my Hinge account that day. I haven't been on a dating app since. For weeks, I was terrified. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see Liam lurking in the shadows. I had nightmares about the grove, about the trees, about the chanting. Gradually, the fear subsided. I started to convince myself that it was all a bad dream, a product of my overactive imagination. Maybe I had just met a really weird guy with some strange beliefs. Maybe I had blown it all out of proportion. Then, a few months later, I saw it. I was scrolling through Facebook, and a friend had shared an article about a local artist who had won an award for his photography. The artist's name was Liam. I clicked on the article. There was a picture of him, standing next to one of his photographs. He looked different, older, more polished. But it was him. I scrolled through his portfolio. His photographs were beautiful, haunting images of nature, mostly of the Redwood National Park. And then I saw it. A photograph of the grove. It was exactly as I remembered it, bathed in soft, golden light. The massive redwood tree stood tall and majestic in the center of the frame, and etched into the bark of the tree, barely visible, were two initials, LM and mine. I froze. I stared at the photograph, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt the blood drain from my face. Then I noticed something else, something that made my blood run cold. In the background of the photograph, partially hidden behind the tree, was a figure. It was blurry and indistinct, but I could make out the shape of a woman. She was wearing a dress, a long, flowing dress that looked familiar. I zoomed in on the photograph, my hands shaking. I squinted, trying to get a better look. And then I saw it. The woman was wearing the same dress I had worn on my picnic with Liam. The dress I had bought specifically for that date. The dress I had never worn again. But the woman in the photograph wasn't me. It was my grandmother. My grandmother who disappeared in Redwood National Park 50 years ago and was never found. Well, buckle up, because I practically tripped over a landmine and detonated the whole damn field myself. I usually don't share this story, because when I do, everyone stares at me like I've sprouted an extra head. But whatever, gotta get it off my chest, right? It all started pretty innocently. Swiping through Hinge one night, bored out of my skull. I was living in this tiny apartment in New Orleans, right in the French Quarter. It was super charming, all wrought iron balconies and overflowing flower boxes, but also, like, ridiculously creepy at night when the tourists went home. So, finding a date seemed like a good way to avoid feeling like I was starring in my own personal horror movie. That's when I saw him. Ethan, his profile said. Picture was a little blurry, but he was definitely cute. Dark hair, intense eyes, kind of an artsy vibe. His bio was even better. Something about exploring the hidden corners of the city and finding beauty in the macabre. I know. Red flags galore, but I was feeling adventurous. Plus, who doesn't love a guy with a slightly dark side? We matched, of course. He messaged me almost immediately, and we hit it off instantly. We talked about everything, our favorite books, our most embarrassing childhood moments, our shared love for obscure jazz music. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. After a few days of nonstop texting, he asked me out. He suggested meeting at this little bar in the Bywater district. It was called the Serpent's Kiss, which, in retrospect, should have been my first clue. The place was dimly lit, decorated with all sorts of weird artifacts, shrunken heads, antique medical instruments, taxidermied animals. It was definitely unique. Ethan was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table in the corner. He looked even better in person. He stood up to greet me, gave me a warm smile, and I instantly felt a little bit weak in the knees. The date started off great. We ordered drinks, something strong and fruity for me, a dark beer for him, and the conversation flowed easily. He told me about his job as a restorer of antique furniture. It sounded fascinating, and I was genuinely impressed by his passion for his work. As the night wore on, though, things started to get a little strange. He started asking me really personal questions, things I wouldn't normally share with someone I'd just met. Questions about my childhood, my fears, my deepest insecurities. He seemed particularly interested in my dreams, asking me to describe them in detail. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to him being a bit of an eccentric. Then he started talking about New Orleans, about the city's history and its connection to the supernatural. He told me stories about voodoo rituals, haunted houses, and unexplained disappearances. It was all a bit much, but I was intrigued. I've always been drawn to the spooky side of things. He then asked if I wanted to see something special. He had this air of mystery, a certain intensity in his eyes that was really kind of exciting. He led me out of the bar and into the dark, winding streets of the Bywater. The only light came from the flickering gas lamps and the occasional passing car. He took me to this old, run-down house. It was completely overgrown with vines, and the windows were boarded up. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. "What is this place?" I asked, feeling a prickle of unease. "This," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "is where I work." He pulled out a set of keys and unlocked the front door. The door creaked open, revealing a dark and dusty interior. The air inside was thick with the smell of mold and decay. "Come on," he said, beckoning me inside. "I want to show you something." I hesitated for a moment. I knew I shouldn't go in there. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run. But I was also curious. And if I'm being honest, I was still attracted to him. So, I took a deep breath and followed him inside. He led me through a maze of rooms, each one more dilapidated than the last. The house was filled with antique furniture, covered in dust and cobwebs. I could see hints of its former grandeur, but now it was just a decaying shell. Finally, he stopped in front of a closed door. "This is it," he said, his voice barely audible. He turned to me, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Are you ready?" I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. He opened the door, revealing a small, windowless room. In the center of the room was a single object, an antique mirror. It was huge, ornate, and covered in intricate carvings. "This mirror," he said, "is very special. It's said to have magical properties. Legend has it that if you stare into it long enough, you can see your deepest desires reflected back at you." He gestured for me to step closer. I hesitated again, but he gently took my hand and led me towards the mirror. As I stood in front of it, I could feel a strange energy emanating from it. It was like the mirror was drawing me in, pulling me into its depths. I stared into the mirror, trying to focus on my desires. But all I could see was my own reflection, distorted and unfamiliar. My face looked pale and gaunt, my eyes wide and frightened. Then, something started to change. The mirror began to ripple, like water. The reflection of the room around me started to fade, replaced by a swirling vortex of colors. I felt dizzy and disoriented, like I was about to lose consciousness. Suddenly, I saw a figure emerge from the depths of the mirror. It was a woman, dressed in a long, flowing gown. Her face was pale and ethereal, and her eyes were filled with a haunting sadness. She reached out to me, her fingers brushing against my cheek. I gasped and stumbled backwards, pulling away from the mirror. "What was that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Ethan just smiled. "That," he said, "was a glimpse of your soul." I didn't know what to say. I was completely freaked out. I wanted to leave, to get as far away from that house as possible. But Ethan wouldn't let me. He insisted that I stay, that I needed to see more. He told me that he had been searching for someone like me for a long time, someone who was open to the possibilities of the supernatural. He said that he believed that I had a special gift, a connection to the other side. He then started to say that he was some kind of medium. He said that he could help me unlock my potential, that he could teach me how to communicate with the spirits. It all sounded completely insane. I tried to leave, but he grabbed my arm. He wouldn't let me go. He said that I couldn't leave, that I was destined to be with him. He started ranting about how we were soulmates, that we were meant to be together forever. I was terrified. I realized that I had made a huge mistake. This guy wasn't just eccentric. He was completely delusional. I struggled to break free from his grip, but he was too strong. Just then, the front door burst open. A group of people stormed into the house, shouting and yelling. They were wearing police uniforms. "Ethan Miller, you're under arrest," one of them shouted. Ethan froze, his eyes wide with fear. He released my arm and backed away slowly. The police officers swarmed him, handcuffing him and leading him out of the house. As they dragged him away, I saw a look of pure desperation on his face. He turned to me and shouted, "I'll find you. You can't escape your destiny." I watched as they took him away, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. I was safe. I was free. The police officers stayed behind to question me. They told me that Ethan Miller was a con artist, a charlatan who preyed on vulnerable women. He would lure them to his house, tell them stories about the supernatural, and then try to scam them out of their money. They also told me that he had a long history of mental illness. He had been in and out of psychiatric hospitals for years. He was a dangerous man, and I was lucky to have escaped with my life. I thanked the officers and left the house, feeling shaken and confused. I couldn't believe that I had almost fallen for his lies. I had been so blinded by his charm and his supposed intelligence that I had ignored all the warning signs. But here's the twist, the really messed up part. As the cops were questioning me, one of them mentioned that Ethan had been using a stolen identity. Ethan Miller wasn't his real name. His real name was, well, it was my name. My first name. The name I used on Hinge. He'd created the whole profile using my stolen photos and information. He wasn't just obsessed with finding a soulmate. He was obsessed with becoming me. I stumbled across this girl, Sarah. Her profile was different. Instead of post pictures, she had snapshots. Her laughing with friends at a concert, hiking in the mountains, reading a book in a coffee shop. She seemed real. Her bio was short and sweet, something about loving old movies and bad puns. I swiped right, figuring what the heck. We matched pretty quickly. Her first message was about my dog, Buster. She said he looked like a total goofball, and honestly, she wasn't wrong. We started chatting, and things just clicked. We talked about everything, music, books, our families, our dreams. It felt easy, natural, like I'd known her forever. After a week of texting, we decided to meet up. She suggested this little bookstore cafe downtown, the Book Nook. It was cozy and quiet, with a great selection of used books and a decent coffee menu. I was a little nervous, but mostly excited. I hadn't felt this way about someone in a long time. I got there early and snagged a table near the window. I ordered a latte and tried to calm my racing heart. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I checked my phone, wondering if I'd gotten the time wrong or if she'd flaked. Just as I was about to text her, she walked in. Sarah looked even better in person. She was wearing a simple blue dress and had her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She smiled when she saw me, and I felt my stomach do a little flip. The date was amazing. We talked for hours, losing track of time completely. We discovered we had a ton in common, including an obsession with old horror movies and a shared love for cheesy pizza. By the end of the night, I was completely smitten. We started seeing each other regularly after that. We went to concerts, explored new restaurants, and spent lazy afternoons watching movies at her apartment. Everything felt perfect. Too perfect, maybe. That's where things started to get weird. It started small. I'd mentioned something I hadn't told her, and she'd already know about it. Like, I was talking about this embarrassing thing that happened to me in middle school, something I'd never told anyone, and she just laughed and said, "Oh yeah, I know all about that." I brushed it off at first, thinking I must have mentioned it in passing. Then, there were the dreams. I started having these really vivid, disturbing dreams. They were always different, but they always featured Sarah. In one, she was standing in a dark forest, her eyes glowing red. In another, she was whispering my name in a language I didn't understand. They were terrifying, and I'd wake up feeling drained and uneasy. I tried to talk to Sarah about it, but she just laughed it off. She said I was probably just stressed out and needed to relax. She suggested we take a weekend trip to the mountains, get away from the city, and unwind. I agreed, hoping it would help. We rented a cabin in the middle of nowhere. It was rustic and charming, with a fireplace and a big porch overlooking the woods. The first day was great. We hiked, cooked dinner together, and sat by the fire, talking and laughing. But that night, the dreams came back, worse than ever. This time, I dreamt that Sarah was standing over me in the cabin, holding a knife. Her eyes were cold and empty, and she whispered, "I know everything about you." I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I started paying closer attention to Sarah, trying to figure out what was going on. I noticed little things I hadn't before, like the way she always seemed to know what I was thinking before I said it, or the way she would sometimes stare at me with this intense, unsettling look in her eyes. One afternoon, while she was out grocery shopping, I decided to do some snooping. I know it's wrong, but I couldn't help myself. I started with her purse, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain what was happening. I found a small, leather-bound journal. I opened it up and started reading. The handwriting was Sarah's, but the words, they were disturbing. The journal was filled with detailed descriptions of me, my habits, my fears, my deepest secrets. It was like she had been watching me my entire life. As I flipped through the pages, I came across an entry that made my blood run cold. It was dated the day before we matched on Hinge. It read, "Target acquired. Subject, my name. Preparation complete. Phase 1 initiated." I slammed the journal shut, my hand shaking. I felt like I was going to throw up. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to run, to get as far away from Sarah as possible, but I was trapped in the middle of nowhere with her. Just then, I heard the sound of a car pulling up to the cabin. It was her. I panicked. I quickly shoved the journal back in her purse and tried to act normal. She walked in, smiling, carrying bags of groceries. "Hey," she said. "I got everything we need for a romantic dinner." I forced a smile. "Great," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. As we were unpacking the groceries, I saw something glinting in her hand. It was a knife, the same knife from my dream. I froze. She saw the look on my face, and her smile faded. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice suddenly cold. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the knife. "You know, don't you?" she said, her eyes narrowing. I nodded slowly. She sighed. "I was hoping it wouldn't come to this," she said, "but you were getting too close." She lunged at me with the knife. I screamed and ducked out of the way. The knife missed me by inches. I scrambled back, knocking over a chair. We struggled. I managed to knock the knife out of her hand, but she was strong. She tackled me to the ground, pinning me beneath her. "I know everything about you," she whispered in my ear. "And now, you're going to know everything about me." Then, she started laughing. I thrashed and fought, but it was no use. She was too strong. I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. And then nothing. I opened my eyes. Sarah was gone. The cabin was silent. I sat up, confused. I looked around, but she was nowhere to be seen. I ran outside, searching the woods, but there was no sign of her. I was alone. I spent the rest of the night in the cabin, terrified and confused. I didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, I packed my bags and drove back to the city. I went straight to the police station and told them everything. They listened to my story, but they seemed skeptical. They said they would investigate, but I could tell they didn't believe me. I went back to my apartment and tried to make sense of what had happened. I changed the locks, installed a security system, and started carrying pepper spray everywhere I went. Weeks went by, and I didn't hear anything from the police. I started to think I was going crazy. Maybe it had all been a dream. Maybe Sarah was just a figment of my imagination. Then, one day, I got a call from a detective. He said they had found Sarah. She wasn't who she said she was. Her real name was Emily Carter, and she had a history of stalking and harassment. She had been using fake profiles on dating apps to target men, learn their secrets, and then disappear. They found her living in a different state, under a different name. She had a whole room dedicated to me, filled with pictures, notes, and personal items she had stolen from my apartment. The detective said they were going to charge her with stalking, harassment, and attempted assault. He said I was lucky to be alive. But here's the twist. They also found something else in her apartment. A file labeled Project, my last name. Inside, there were documents detailing a complex psychological experiment. It turns out Sarah, or Emily, wasn't just a stalker. She was part of some kind of research study. The study was designed to test the limits of human connection and manipulation. They were trying to see how much information one person could gather about another through social media and online interactions, and how that information could be used to control them. I was their guinea pig. The whole thing was insane. I still don't know who was behind the study or what their motives were. The detectives said they were still investigating. But one thing I do know is this: I'm never using Hinge again. It's just not worth the risk. And I'm definitely more cautious about what I share online. You never know who's watching. I try not to think about it too much, but sometimes, late at night, I still have those dreams. And I can still hear Sarah's voice whispering in my ear. I know everything about you. It's a chilling reminder of how easily our lives can be infiltrated and manipulated in this digital age. This whole ordeal messed me up and still does. I was bored one Friday night, scrolling through Hinge, not really expecting much. I'd been on the app for a while, gone on a few dates that were fine. Nothing special. Then I saw her. Sarah. Her profile pic was this candid shot of her laughing, eyes crinkled at the corners, standing in front of a bookstore. She looked real. Like someone you could actually have a conversation with, you know? Not just another selfie queen. Her bio was short and sweet. Lover of books, rainy days, and good coffee. I swiped right without even thinking. We matched almost instantly. Which, okay, already felt a little too good to be true. But I was riding the wave of optimism, so I messaged her. We started chatting, and it was easy. Like we'd known each other forever. We talked about books, obviously. Movies, our families, everything. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and I felt the same way about her. After a week of constant texting, we decided to meet up. She suggested this little cafe downtown, a place I'd never been to but heard good things about. I was nervous, obviously. I always get nervous before first dates, but I was also excited. I really felt like this could be something special. The cafe was cozy, all warm lighting and comfy chairs. I got there a few minutes early and grabbed a table. I kept checking my phone, rereading our texts, trying to calm my nerves. Then she walked in. She looked even better in person. She was wearing this cute dress, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She smiled when she saw me, and my heart did this weird little flip-flop thing. We hugged, and then we sat down. The date started out great. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed so naturally. She was funny, intelligent, and surprisingly down to earth. I was completely smitten. But then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. She kept asking me really specific questions about my apartment, like what floor I lived on, how many windows I had, what kind of security system I used. I brushed it off at first, thinking she was just being curious. But the questions kept coming, and they got more and more detailed. Then, she started talking about my routine. She seemed to know a lot about my schedule, like when I went to work, when I went to the gym, even when I walked my dog. I hadn't told her any of this stuff. I started to feel uneasy. I tried to change the subject, but she kept steering the conversation back to my personal life. It was like she was trying to build a profile of me, piece by piece. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, and when I looked in the mirror, I noticed how pale I was. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm myself down. I told myself I was overreacting, that she was just being friendly. But the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. When I got back to the table, she was on her phone, typing furiously. She quickly put it away when she saw me. "Sorry," she said. "Just had to send a quick text." I forced a smile. "No problem." The rest of the date was a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, scrutinized. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. So I stayed, forcing myself to make conversation. Finally, the date ended. We walked outside, and I offered to walk her to her car. She declined, saying she had parked nearby. We hugged goodbye, and I practically ran back to my apartment. I locked the door behind me, double-checking all the windows. I felt like I could finally breathe again. I tried to convince myself that I was just being paranoid, that I had let my imagination run wild. But then, I got a text from her. It was a picture. It was a picture of me, sitting at my desk in my apartment. The picture had been taken through my window. I froze. My blood ran cold. I didn't know what to do. I stared at the picture, trying to make sense of it. How could she have taken that picture? How did she know where I lived? I ran to the window and looked outside. I didn't see anyone, but I knew she was out there, watching me. I called the police, but they said there was nothing they could do without more evidence. They took my statement, but they didn't seem to take me seriously. I spent the rest of the night barricading myself in my apartment. I pushed furniture in front of the doors and windows. I turned on all the lights. I couldn't sleep. Every creak and groan of the building sent a jolt of fear through me. The next day, I stayed home from work. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't open the door. I just sat there waiting. I knew she would come back. And she did. That evening, I heard a noise outside my door. A soft scratching sound, like someone was trying to pick the lock. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under my bed and crept towards the door. My heart was pounding in my chest. I could hear my own breath echoing in my ears. The scratching stopped. Then I heard a voice. "It's okay," the voice said. "It's just me." It was Sarah. I didn't open the door. "Go away," I said, my voice trembling. "I just want to talk," she said. "Please." I didn't answer. "I know you're scared," she said, "but I'm not going to hurt you." I didn't believe her. "Please," she begged. "Just open the door." I hesitated. A part of me wanted to believe her. A part of me wanted to know why she was doing this. But I couldn't. I couldn't risk it. "Go away," I said again, more firmly this time. There was a long silence. Then I heard her footsteps fading away. I stayed up all night, watching the door. She didn't come back. The next day, I moved out of my apartment. I packed everything I owned into boxes and drove to my brother's house, a few states away. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I changed my phone number. I deleted my social media accounts. I wanted to disappear. I thought I was safe. I thought I had escaped. But I was wrong. A few weeks later, I was at my brother's house, sitting in the living room, watching TV. The doorbell rang. My brother answered it. I heard him talking to someone. Then I heard him say my name. I froze. I knew who it was. I got up and walked to the door. And there she was. Sarah. She smiled at me. "Hello," she said. "I've been looking for you." Behind her, I saw something that made my blood run even colder than before my brother. Except it wasn't my brother. It was Sarah, wearing a disturbingly realistic mask of his face. The mask was too perfect. How could someone make something so lifelike? And that's when it hit me. The Sarah I met on Hinge, the Sarah who was so obsessed with me, wasn't Sarah at all. It was someone else, someone wearing a mask. And not just a physical mask, a psychological one too. The real Sarah was standing behind her, tied up and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. The person in the mask smiled, a chillingly familiar grin. "You didn't think you could get rid of me that easily, did you?" she said, her voice a distorted, unsettling imitation of my brother's. "We're just getting started."